Hello, Mrs. Moriarty's art class. So this demo is on another color wheel, except using watercolor. So if all you have is watercolor at home, instead of acrylic paint, or if you want to use paint instead of colored pencils, you'll be watching this demo. So we're only going to be using the three primary colors to paint with. We're going to be using red, yellow, and blue. And I have my color wheel all drawn out. Okay, make sure you label it. The inside colors are the colors that I'm going to be mixing to create, and the outside rim will be the complementary colors mixed with them. So we'll be creating neutrals later on for the outside ring. So right now I'm just going to start with yellow. Okay, so you want to make sure you have your paint. You want to make sure you have a jar of water, a round paintbrush, watercolor paintbrush, and some paper towels to dry your brush and clean your brush while you're working. So I'm just going to use yellow first, okay? Make sure you're loading the brush with the paint. And I'm just going to paint tip of the brush to the edge and paint backwards into the shape. That way I'll keep it nice and clean and neat. Now with watercolor, you might want to have a blow dryer on hand because you can't paint the shape next to it until it dries, or it might bleed together. So that's just one little tip, just to speed things along, okay? I'm going to be painting yellow-orange next. You can go in any order you want, but I'll be painting yellow-orange next. So then I'm going to have to mix my paint on my palette right here. So I'm going to scoop up some yellow. And now we want our yellow-orange to look a lot different than our orange. We want it to be a lot more yellow. So I'm going to use a lot more yellow paint. Clean off my brush so I can grab my red paint. Just grabbing a little bit of red to make a yellow-orange. Now, if I feel like that might be not yellow enough, I can just clean my brush off and add just a little bit more yellow to that paint. And there I have some yellow-orange. Again, I want it to be a lot different than the orange, so I want to make it a lot more yellow. Now, actually, I think this is dry enough to paint. I'm painting clean enough. Rotate your drawing if you need to as you're painting to make it comfortable for you, to make it nice and clean. And always paint tip to the edge. So now I have my yellow-orange. Now I already have this color mixed up, so I'm just going to add some red to it to make it a little bit more orange. Here we go, I have my orange paint. I want the paint to be a little bit more opaque than that, so I think the paint is a little bit more watered down. So I'm actually going to scoop a little bit more pigment into my pile here to make it more condensed. One way to help that is to dry off your brush as you're grabbing your paint so there's not as much water going in there. So that's a lot more pigmented now. Rather than more water, we want a little bit more pigment. So now I can paint in my shape. And then you can see there's a definite difference between the yellow, yellow-orange, and orange. So now when I go to my red-orange, I want it a lot more red. I'll clean off my brush, dry off my brush, and grab a little bit more red paint and add that to this mixture here. And then I can paint it in the red-orange slot. I want that to be a little bit more red, so rotate. Watercolor dries lighter, so that's why you want to make it as bright as you can, just for this exercise. Again, if you don't blow dry as you go, you might get a little bit of bleeding, Okay, so just make sure your color isn't bleeding together, okay? Or keep a little bit of separation between the colors. So now I'm just going to use pure red. And I'll continue to do this and go around the entire color wheel. Using pure red here. Now, if you have a big array of colors and you actually have, I'm going to leave a little bit of a white mark in between because I don't want these colors to bleed together. If you have a big array of colors, we talked about how red, yellow, and blue are considered the primary colors, but when you're mixing with colored paint, you might want to use magenta, cyan, and yellow. If you use magenta, which is like a hot pink, cyan, which is like a turquoise blue, and yellow, you'll get more vivid colors and more saturated, brighter colors rather than the typical red, yellow, and blue. We all grew up learning were the primary colors. If you open up a printer, a colored printer, you'll see that the ink is actually magenta, cyan, and yellow, and that's because you'll get your more vivid colors with those colors. Okay, so then we would go on to red, violet. So this is where I'll just take my red, clean off my brush because I don't want to taint my paint, and grab a little blue. And I want this to be more red, so I'm not going to add too much blue, just a little bit. And I think I had a little too much there, so I'm going to grab more red and really saturate it with some of this red paint. So there I have my red, violet. And again, if I painted right up to this edge, this is a real kind of like really wet edge here, it's just going to bleed together. So I'm going to make sure that I just leave a little bit of a line between the colors, because I'm not going to take the time to blow dry for this demo. And I'll keep going around. Now I'm at my violet, so I want to add more blue paint to this mixture I already have. And I'm getting a violet color. Just a touch more red back into it because I think that's more of a blue violet, which I want for my next one. So I have my violet. Now again, if you mix cyan, which is like a turquoise blue, and a magenta, you're going to get a much more brilliant violet than this grayed out violet we're getting with red and blue. But we use what we got. So if all you have is a simple palette of watercolor like this one, then that's what you're going to use. Okay, and now moving on to my blue violet. It's important you label your triangles before you start, so you don't get confused along the way. Added some more blue to my mixture. Now I have my blue violet. Take your time, craftsmanship counts. And now I'm moving on to blue. Just pure blue in this spot here. It's coming up really saturated. I'm going to rotate this around. It's easier to paint. Always painting tip to the edge. Okay, almost finished. Going on to my blue-green. So I'm going to make a pile of blue over here. Clean out my brush and add some yellow to it. Got my blue-green. Now again, because we're using this blue and yellow, the green might look a little bit more like an olivey green. I think that might have been better in the green spot. That's not blue-green enough for me, so, and it's starting to bleed a little bit. So I'm actually going to add a little bit more blue to this mixture here. Because it's too big of a jump. I want this a lot more blue. And then my next base will be that green. And it's starting to bleed a little bit, no, that's okay. And that blue paint's very, very saturated, you can see. Okay, so now I'm going to add more yellow back into this mixture to get that green color that I had. A little bit more yellow. I want it to be different. I want these two to look different. I think they're looking a little too similar, so again, more yellow to that mixture. And these paint's really wet, so I'm going to leave that bit of white outline around it, or else they will bleed together, and we do not want that. Okay, last one is the yellow-green. So I'm going to take some of this yellow, actually going to put it on the side here and just grab some of this and put that in there. Now I have my yellow-green. That yellow is dry already, so I don't have to worry about the yellow bleeding in with that. Okay, so now we have our completed color wheel using just 3 colors, the red, blue, and yellow, to create all the colors on the color wheel. Now we're going to create some neutrals, and I already have some of my paint mixed up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix my red and my green together to get some neutral. So I'm going to start with red, and if you want to clean off your palette at this point, or you can, with this, you can take this out and you have more room to mix. I'm going to start with red. I'm going to add a little bit of that green that I mixed up. And when we mix complements together, we get a neutral color and it dulls it. So I don't want to dull it too much. I just want you guys to see how, if you have a red color you're painting and you want to dull that red down a little bit, what would you add? You wouldn't add black, because black just deadens a color. You want to add the complement. Now you can see I created sort of a brick red by adding a little bit of green to it. It just dulls that red right down. And that red's still a little wet, so that's why I'm not painting exactly all the way up to it. So when I go over to my green triangle over here, I'm going to start with green, which I have mixed up here already. Start with green. And I'm going to add just a dot of the red to it. So just a dot of this red to the green mixture. And now what I have is like an olive green color. Okay, so these two should be different because this one should be red with just a little bit of green. This should be green with just a little bit of red. So if you have to remix colors, let's say I'm doing this blue-green, I'll just remix, put a little spot over here. I have to have blue. And I'll grab some yellow, just a little bit, because it's blue-green. So now I have my blue-green mixed up. Dry off my paintbrush. Make sure you're drying off your paintbrush, if not the color really gets watered down, and then it's light like this. So now I have my blue-green, and I have to mix some red-orange in with it. I already have my red-orange mixed up over here, so I'm going to just mix up a little bit over here. And that's the neutral color that I'll plug in here. It's okay if it's lighter. You would just have to mix up more paint, less water. And then you have a neutral. So over here, I'm going to mix up some red-orange again because this is getting a little watered down. We don't want the paint to be too light where you can't see it. So here's a red-orange. Dry off that brush so I don't water the paint down. Take this blue-green and mix it into that red-orange. And now I have the neutral where it's red-orange with just a little bit of the complement added to it. Okay, so you're going to continue that all the way around, and then that's your first project, your color wheel. Enjoy and have fun.